Okay, we're going to do a three-part series on how to upgrade your Penn Fathoms and Torques. This applies to a lot of other two-speed reels. It does not apply to any dual or twin drag reels like most of the Accurates or the new generation Talicas. It also doesn't apply to Makairas. They use some different strategies to make the reels work a little bit better, but it comes at a price as well. What Penn did here is I think they did some tremendous engineering with reducing the amount of weight, the amount of material. They just have stripped it down to the bare minimum, and the reels function tremendously well. They're super durable, great reels, but they come at a price. That engineering comes at a price. And that is, a lot of times it's difficult to get good free spool at high drags. And also these reels have a lot of handle resistance. And that's where we're going to start on this. In part one, we're going to talk about handle resistance and free spool performance. Okay, handle resistance it's a cumulative thing. That's important to know. It goes along the drivetrain, and every little bearing, shim, bushing adds handle resistance. So we need to eliminate it wherever we can. And that starts right here on the outside with the knob. This is a very simple knob. There's no bearings in here, just a bushing. But remove the two screws. There's an additional screw underneath that. Pull off the knob, clean everything up. Put in a drop of oil or lightweight grease. I always use this stuff. But you want to, it's a maintenance item. It's something you have to keep up with. You want this to spin nice and freely. Okay, we're going to disassemble the reel, and it is already mostly disassembled. Okay, this is the metal drag plate. There is a bearing in the middle of that. We'll go back to that after a minute. Okay, going back to handle resistance. This is your anti-reverse system here. Anti-reverse gear, anti-reverse dogs. Take a photo before you do anything, because it can go in a couple different ways, but it can only work in one way, so make sure you get it right. Okay. When you get this reel from Penn, it will usually just have a ton of grease inside. I like to remove it. That's some people wouldn't want that. I oil most of this stuff. I put a little light coating of grease on the gears and other components underneath there, but the rest of this is oiled. Like I say, you'll get it from the factory, and this will just be completely full of grease. So anti-reverse gear, anti-reverse dogs. This causes a lot of handle resistance. You can test it right here outside of the reel. You can just spin it, and if your reel if the handle is hard to turn, you should go to work on this. What I do is I remove all the grease from all these components, and I oil them instead, and that includes right here in the axle of the dogs. Okay, the dogs. You see these copper colored things here? These are springs. They grip this gear. Those springs are adjustable. Sometimes you will get the springs will be very, very tight, and that causes resistance. You can loosen them up. I will show you that here. Here's the anti-reverse gear. Once again, it can only function it can go in two ways, but it can only function in one way. Here is a dog, and you can see the spring there. It's kind of V-shaped, and that's adjustable. It's up to you how tight to make it. Here's what you need to know. If it's too tight, there's handle resistance. If it's too loose, your dogs don't work. If your dogs don't work, the handle goes backwards when a fish is pulling on the line. And it's a disaster. You're not going to win. You're gonna lose that 150-pound bluefin you hooked. So when you assemble this, whatever you do with it, do this little test that I'm doing and make sure that those dogs seat fully every time. Okay, going back to my donor reel here. Here's the pinion bearing, pinion gear. Pull that out, and underneath is the pinion bearing. This is a wear item. These things wear out, particularly on like the 40 size reels and above, the ones that are being used for nighttime bluefin fishing or heavy yo-yo fishing or wahoo bomb fishing. These wear out. You'll know it with kind of unexplained increased handle resistance, and you'll hear it. When the reel is in gear, in high gear, and you're turning the handle fast, you'll hear the whining. A lot of times at night on the nighttime bluefin fishing, you'll hear reels with bad pinion bearings all the time. You hear them whining. I carry one with me so I can replace it on the spot, and I wear them out, particularly on the Fathom 40s, Torque 40s, and the old original Talica 20s. Okay. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about free spool. I want you to notice something here. I've got a red mark on one side of the spool shaft, a corresponding red mark inside of there. It doesn't matter how this spool shaft goes in. What matters is it goes in the same every time. Later on, we're going to, as we're tuning this reel, we're going to want this to go back in the same orientation every time. Okay, so we've got our metal drag plate, a coil, a bearing, and a bearing sleeve. A lot of times you will find a tiny little shim either stuck in there or stuck to the side of the bearing. That's a bearing shim. That's what we're going to talk about in part 2. So you may or may not find bearing shims in your reel, but you should always check for them. And in this part of, in part 1, we want to remove them. We don't want them influencing our free spool performance. Okay, I will show you the other side or the entire spool shaft assembly. Handle side, in this case it's the right side, but it's good to make the distinguishment because that's where you're going to put your shims later, is on the handle side. These bearings are the same size. And then inside here there's some Belleville washers. There's a 4-piece thrust bearing. I'll see if I can show that to you. You should just lightly coat that with grease, not very much, or it will migrate to your spool bearing. But that has nothing to do with what we're doing now with upgrading performance. Okay, let's talk about bearings. First of all, this bearing is a metric bearing. It's a 6 by 12 by 4 millimeter bearing. Penn bearings are crazy expensive. They're like 17 bucks a piece. I get mine on smoothdrag.com or on eBay at HPR Bearings. They're half the price. You can get lots of different types of bearings with different, here's a bearing shield, some shielded, some unshielded, some unlubed, some lubed with oil, some lubed with grease. There's a lot of different ways to go. Penn supplies the spool bearings. The two spool bearings are shielded, oiled bearings straight from Penn. And they are good bearings. They work just fine. If you want to use them as they are, just soak them. Get a shot glass, put some acetone, lacquer thinner in there. Soak them for 10 or 20 minutes, dry them out, and then apply 1 drop. Don't put too much oil in because it will migrate and start to interfere with other functions of your reel. 1 drop of TSI 321. And the stuff lasts for a whole season. I do something different. I pull the shields off of my bearings. This is something Alan Tanney taught us years ago. And you can lessen the chance of interference between the shield and the bearing. So I pull the shims. It's very, I pull the bearing shields. It's easy to do. I'll try and show that to you real quickly, or at least simulate it. Okay, this bearing shielded on this side, unshielded on that side. I've already pulled that off. So here's how I do that. Let's see if we can see this. If we look along the edge of this bearing, we'll find a place with a gap. There it is right there. You can see there's a little gap. What we do is we take a tiny little hook. This is an owner mosquito hook. You can use a mosquito, or a sabiki hook, or a fly fishing hook, and you get it in there in the gap and you pick it out. And you'll end up picking out a circlip that holds in the shield. You can replace those as well if you like. They're replaceable. Not all bearings have circlips. Some are pressed in, requires a different procedure, but I prefer to pull the shields on mine on the spool bearings only. And I go back, I soak them and lube them, and then it's time to reassemble the reel once that is done. And we're going to, once again, assemble the reel with no bearing shims at this point. And what we're going to do right now is very simple. Before we move it on any further, we're going to make sure this thing free spools like crazy. It should be just super free. There's a little bit of bearing rumble. You may not be able to hear that on the video. I can feel it. I never worry about it. When you're using that really lightweight synthetic oil, you'll feel a little bearing rumble, but as long as it spools, and this thing obviously will spool for a very long time, that's what we're looking for. Okay, we're going to reassemble the reel, but before we do that, excuse me, we're going to check for corrosion, grease on the edge of the spool shoulders. We're going to make sure there's no chance of any interference anyplace. That includes the frame in here. On these Gen 2s, a lot of times the paint will bubble up. Take a little bit of fine sandpaper, clean it up, apply some clear nail polish to that spot, and it'll be sealed and it'll work just fine. But we're always going to check for any potential interference issues at this point. We're going to assemble the reel, lining up the red marks. There we go. And I'm just going to assemble this just enough to give you an idea what I'm looking for. And we're basically just going to, once again, check our free spool at a relatively low drag, make sure that we have no interference issues. Besides what I just talked about with frame and spool interference issues, there's always the potential for interference issues between the drag components. No matter what, at this stage of the game, we have to resolve any issues before going forward. Whatever we've got going on in this reel right now isn't going to change anything else we do. So we need to make sure that we have a reel that's functioning at a really high level. Okay, here we've got low drag. It's probably that's gonna be 5 or 6 pounds, and we're just simply gonna check free spool. We may lose a little bit of free spool in comparison to what it was when the spool was outside of the reel, but we're just ensuring right now we have no interference issues. We already know our spool bearings are great. That's not going to be an issue. We're just making sure that everything else spins really well, and this one spins fantastic. So with that, we're going to go on to part 2, and that will be shimming the spool bearings. It's kind of the thing that a lot of people don't quite understand, and it can make a really big difference in how your reel performs.